What is the difference between non-celiac gluten sensitivity and celiac disease? What you might know is it's not just celiac gut. You've got celiac brain, and it can cause white lesion matters in the brain. It can be rapid onset too. You get to a certain age, and all bets are off. Gluten ataxia can happen within 15 months. These white lesions can start to grow. Now, the other thing to understand is it can attack the central nervous system too. So, in your extremities, you can get pins and needles. So, that's a clear indication that, yeah, maybe you have gluten sensitivity. And this is called tissue transglutamase 6. So, it's an enzyme that your body produces against gluten. So, you can actually test for this. And I'll show you exactly what to do in a moment. And then, of course, you've got celiac skin, and we'll talk more in depth about this. So this is kind of early stages. There's just a few pimples, like on the back of your tricep there, on your butt, can show up kind of anywhere, but it can get much worse than that. And it's just a progression towards full-blown celiac skin. So you got celiac brain, celiac skin, and celiac gut. So I'll show you what to look for, what to test, everything on this video here. Now, what we also have to fully understand is that you've got immune issues with foods. There's two categories there. And then you've also got non immune system issues as well. So this is generally DNA. So I'm going to cover both on this. So number one here, if you've got a food allergy, the test is very simple. And this is basically all the medical system tests for. They test for food allergies. They don't believe that that's worthwhile. Why? Because it's not life-threatening. Okay. That's why they don't test for it. Now, an allergy is rapid onset, so you can get asthma, wheezing, coughing, immediate joint pain, or anaphylaxis. So, if you eat foods and shit happens, more than likely you could have an allergy to that. Now, it mightn't be an anaphylaxis, but if you get severe gut pain, you get severe joint pain, brain fog, yeah, you could certainly have an IgE allergy there. Now, we've also got the most sinister one of all, which is up to 72 hours. Now, the key idea here is very simply the older you get, the worse this becomes. Why? Because when you're young, you can clear out a lot of that inflammation and stress. So no harm, no foul. But if you've got poor genes, 25, 35, 45, 55, just depending on your genetic makeup, this can start to happen. And then guess what happens? The medical system says this is normal. It's not normal, and you can fix it. So over this side, number two, so this is non-immune. So this is lack of enzymes. So your DNA makes proteins and enzymes. It does other things, but we're just going to focus in on making proteins and enzymes. Now, when everything's functioning optimally, you make a high functioning protein. So it does work like detox, make neurotransmitters, make testosterone, make energy, make build muscle, all of those things. Now, everyone on the planet has what's called single nucleotide polymorphism. Some people have got a lot and some people don't have a lot. So the key idea here is that some people can get to 70, 80 and doing pretty good, even live a pretty poor lifestyle and they've got plenty of energy and they look pretty good. Now, for other people, it can start to show up at 25 if you've got a lot of these SNPs, 35, 45, 55. And the medical system says, just normal, put up with it. No, you can test for this and take it out, right? If you understand these genetic vulnerabilities, you can largely take it out. So you got things that cause lack of enzyme functioning or complete loss of enzyme functioning. So the idea here is when you've got these SNPs, what happens is the DNA have got a sequence of letters and it codes the amino acids for that protein. So these amino acids make up that protein. Now you'll note with this altered protein here, see here, it just looks a little bit different than the high functioning protein there. So what does that mean? It just doesn't work as well, right? You can't make neurotransmitters efficiently. You could have an MTHF mutation there. So that whole pathway is reduced by up to 70%. So it just doesn't work as efficiently. You can also have testosterone issues with these proteins. So you got lack or loss of enzyme functioning. Now we've tested over 250 people, and what we're seeing is lectins, gluten, lactose, fructose, nightshades, plant sterols, and a lot of issues with the COMT, monoamine oxidase, dopamine issues, serotonin, mushrooms with ergothioneine, and also a lot of people don't have good blood sugar regulation. Now, like with the food sensitivities here, it can take up to 72 hours for this to show up. But Whether you've got an exaggerated immune response because of these food sensitivities that your immune system doesn't like, which is completely independent of your DNA, they both start to destroy your gut. So it causes a lot of stress and inflammation. So when I went through and did my certificate in nutrition, the functional doctors said gut health is the foundation. More than likely, you've heard me speaking about this on multiple videos now. The reason for that is your gut has a brain. It's called the enteric nervous system, and it speaks to every organ in your body, like the brain. So think about it. If your gut's not really healthy, and a lot of people don't have a healthy gut, what's going to happen? Well, you're going to have stress, anxiety, depression, IBS, schizophrenia, even cognitive decline, brain fog is the first clue, memory issues, and even autism. And then, your hormones. So, endocrine axis, sex hormones go down, and what's replaced? Well, stress hormones, unhappy brain. And it also starts to attack the heart, cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis, thrombotic events, which is thick, sludgy blood, hypertension. So, not cool, is it? And then the lungs, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, asthma, allergies, wheezing, coughing, things like that. And then we've also got the liver axis, and the liver is absolutely foundational. So it detoxes chemicals, and they're coming in everywhere. These chemicals, we're breathing them in. There's just a boatload of them. And it also keeps estrogen, right, at healthy levels, which boosts testosterone. Then, of course, the pancreas, two important things. Number one, the pancreas releases enzymes so you digest your food. And when you digest your food properly, you don't have any inflammation, you don't have bloating and distension, you don't burp, you don't fart a lot. Now, the second thing that the pancreas does is it releases satiety hormones. Think about that, like CCK, up the vagus nerve into the brain. It says, stop eating. You've had enough. So think about how profound that is. Then, of course, the bone axis, osteoporosis, being frail as you age. And then, of course, the muscle axis. So you got muscle axis. Now, the really important thing to focus on here is when you hit 40, 50, 60, and you don't pay attention to your gut, sarcopenia sets in and you become very frail. And that ain't fun, let me tell you. Now, if you're a younger dude, you've got a sick gut and you're doing everything. You're paying the personal trainer, you're eating all the right foods. Well, you think you're eating the right foods and nothing's happening. You're skinny fat, you're trying your hardest, you're fatigued, and you're just like, what do I have to do? Or maybe this is where we need to start. As I learned from the functional doctors, it's the foundation, gut health. Then we've got the skin axis. So we've got things like alopecia, hair loss, acne, cirrhosis, atopic dermatitis, advanced wrinkles, and skin aging. And as a triple whammy, the reproductive axis, so the ball sack in men and the ovaries in ladies. So you're tapping out with your brain because you got anxiety and stress. That's shutting down sex hormones. And your endocrine axis is shut down. And then your ball sack, a lot of oxidative stress and inflammation. You can also have primary hypogonadism or secondary. Kidneys, bladder, thyroid axis, eye axis, gallbladder axis. Every organ has an axis. So these food sensitivities, whether it's the immune system or your DNA, they're driving a sick gut. And you can fix this. That's a beautiful thing. Now, the key idea again is what you don't measure, you don't know. As we progress, I'll shine the torch on what you need to do because right now you're walking into a dark room and there's a dartboard on the wall. So you got the dart and you're throwing it, hoping that you'll hit the bullseye. But until you understand what I'm about to show you, then it's difficult to get this right. So that's just set up everything. So let's have a look at what causes a leaky gut. So we'll talk about gluten in a moment, the difference between celiac and non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So this is what's driving a leaky gut. So we now know that the gut is foundational, and these food sensitivities like gluten, like nightshades, like lectins, like fructose, like tyramine, all of these things I've been speaking about can start to cause that leaky gut. Then emotional stress, because when cortisol goes up, it suppresses secretory IgA, and that's the protective lining of your gut. So you're sick to your stomach. And this is just chronic. And that starts to deteriorate the enteric nervous system, the brain in your gut. Then immune stress, which is food sensitivities. This is what we've been talking about. And this can also be heavy metals and mold over this side, chemical stress. And then the genetic stress, the DNA single nucleotide polymorphisms, as I've been speaking about. And if you train way too hard in the gym, physical stress can shut that down because you're just overproducing these stress hormones. They're shutting down and suppressing secretory IgA. So the thickness of your gut lining goes down, acid reflux, you feel like crap. So that's what's driving your leaky gut. Now, another one that we're seeing quite frequently, about 30% of the people that we're testing, is nightshades and plant insecticides. So a lot of carnivores, they reckon the carnivore is the best diet. I don't think that it is. I don't think that it's optimal. This is my personal experience and work with over 250 people. Because when you know your DNA vulnerabilities, when you know your immune vulnerabilities, that takes off all the guesswork. So these nightshades are no joke because they're releasing a plethora of inflammation, suppressing secretory IgA. So the thickness of your gut is going down, your intestines, your lungs. So asthma, wheezing can go up too, and it leads to full-blown inflammatory bowel disease. So these nightshades are in a lot of foods, and yeah, you can be sensitive to them. So your leaky gut, as Dr. Daddis says, so this is a functional clinician, PhD, DHSC, MS, MMSC, FACN, decades of research, multiple peer-reviewed publications in places like Nature. Your leaky gut, however it's been driven, there's a multitude of ways: depression, fatigue, anxiety, chronic pain, autoimmunity, and food sensitivities, inappropriate food sensitivities. So let's have a bit of a case study with gluten. So this is an immune test. This is an IgG and IgA. So on this particular test, there's nothing really coming up in IgA. Everything is showing up on IgG. So IgG is your antibodies that your immune system is making in your blood. Systemic inflammation, right? Systemic inflammation. So over here, dairy. So this client in particular, he said to me, look, I'm cool with dairy. We'll have a look. No. A lot of the dairy, including the way that he was chowing down, highly inflammatory. He said he was good with eggs. Not so much, highly inflammatory. Now let's have a look at his gluten risk. So here is the DNA, and these are the SNPs. Can I even do it? SNPs right there. So these are the SNPs. So he's got the halotypes of gluten sensitivity and also celiac disease. So a plethora of celiac risk there. Now, as you can see here, the grains, we're told grains are really healthy. Well, are they? Let's have a look at this. So gliadin, which is a component of gluten. Gluten itself, oats is very similar. It's also contaminated with gluten sometimes. And wheat, so he's tapping out everywhere. And another component of wheat, which is wheat germ agglutinin, which is a lectin. So lectins is another one, so it's like a double whammy. He's getting into the inflammatory state there. So that's thing number one. So his body is fighting wars it can't pay for. So that's where his energy is going. It's absolutely tapping out there. Now, this is the second test that we did, which is called a GI map. So this tests your gut health, colon, intestines, gut health. Now, he has inflammation, dysbiosis, and metabolic imbalance. Thankfully, no maldigestion and no infections yet, but he's moving towards that. So you can see 0 to 10, he's got pretty severe inflammation. So now we know that he's got these antibodies to gluten and he's got inflammation, right, in his gut and intestines. Look at this. This is a very significant study. It was done over 40 years, 29,000 people. So think about that. 40 years they were tracking these people, 29,000 plus participants, and they were tracking all-cause mortality, dying from anything. And what they found was your all-cause mortality here with latent celiac disease was 1.35. What does that mean? A 35% increase risk of dying from anything. And that's here, Marsh stage 0. So what that means is there's no inflammation yet, but you're testing positive for these antibodies, as you're seeing there. testing positive, but there's no inflammation. But this dude has inflammation. So 35% increased risk of dying. So if we see anybody that we help there, they've got to be gluten-free. Have to be gluten-free because that increases your all-cause mortality of 35%, but you're also progressing to full-blown autoimmune disease. I repeat, any autoimmune disease. Now, this individual at 25, he was in here between Marsh stage 1 and 2. So what does that mean for his all-cause mortality? 72%. So he was super happy that we identified this at 25. So this can start to hit you when you're a kid, you're a teenager, your 20s, your 30s, your 40s. For me, it was 45. That's when it showed up for me. So I was progressing to full-blown celiac disease. So as you can see there, these grains we're told are very healthy. Healthy? Maybe not so much. And here's another individual. Dysbiosis, metabolic imbalance, and infection. Luckily, he didn't have maldigestion, but massive inflammation. And look at his grains there, So, as you can see, gluten sensitivity can actually progress towards full-blown celiac disease. Now, remember that you can have celiac skin, celiac brain, which is gluten ataxia, and also gluten sensitivity. And just so you know, like we're talking not only about gluten, we're talking about all food sensitivity. So one of my clients here, he told me that I'm good with dairy. So before we do any work, I say, what do you think you're good with? He said, I'm good with dairy, right? No, he's not. He also liked to have some carrot juice in the morning there. So you see carrots there, highly inflammatory. So you had a carrot juice with turmeric in it. And yeah, turmeric is supposed to be anti-inflammatory, but it's pretty inflammatory for that person. So he was told that, this is really healthy. How can a carrot and turmeric harm him? How can that cause inflammation? Well, these tests shine the torch on what is causing this inappropriate food sensitivity in you. So you don't want to leave this to chance. You want to know exactly what foods are harming you and what foods are healing you. Now, the great news is, as I'll talk about in a few slides from here, in 6 months, you can take another food sensitivity test and it will look completely different. However, there's only one way it'll look better. You have to heal your gut first, and I'll explain why that is. But before I explain why that is, let's just have a look at what happens. So this is autoimmunity. So these food sensitivities, doesn't matter what it is. It could be carrots. It could be a plethora of different things. This is what we want. No immune reactivity. That's healthy right there. Now, as you saw there, Marsh stage 0, no inflammation yet. So your CRP in a blood panel, no inflammation, but you're making these damn antibodies. So you're progressing towards full-blown autoimmune disease. Now, these autoimmune diseases, that's what can show up. All of these ones can show up because your immune system is attacking you. It's got no clue. It thinks that all of these foods that you're eating are attacking you. Now, why do you think that's the case? Well, let's listen to the experts. So right here, this is the protective line of your gut. So where you absorb your nutrients in the small intestine there. So in a perfect world, what we want is healthy, tight junctions. As you can see there, these healthy, tight junctions. So they're tight, they're welded shut. Nothing can get through. That's what we need. Now, when you've got a leaky gut, and it's a plethora of things that can cause that, these food particles, chemicals, toxins, they go through in a systemic circulation. And then your immune system says, this shouldn't be here. We have to attack it. Now, to fully understand that, we have to understand one thing. The immune system makes mistakes. So the human protein sequence, so this is your tissues, like your brain tissue, your thyroid tissue, your pancreas tissue, right? They've got a certain amino acid sequence. So all these amino acids there. Now, because the immune system isn't very smart yet, if these undigested food particles go in, so this is the food protein amino acid, this can be meat, this can be plant proteins. They look very similar. So you can see in the red there, they're matching up pretty similar. So if this is always happening, you're always triggering the immune response, it makes a mistake. So I'll play this video for you. And this is from Dr. Daddis, the clinician. And again, he's got a PhD, DHSC, MS, MMSC, FACN, highly educated. So check out this.
reaction to a particular food protein shares a similar sequence of amino acids to human proteins, in combination with loss of immunological tolerance, cross-reactive antibodies can occur from food to human tissue. So let me explain that. What that means is basically our proteins in our body, our tissues in our body are made of proteins, and the foods we eat are proteins. And when you really look at proteins, proteins have a bunch of amino acids clustered together. And this is known as an amino acid sequence. So if you look at the illustration here, you can see food protein sequence on the top here. You see some of these are very similar to the human protein sequence. And if that takes place, there's a possibility for what's called cross-reactivity to occur. So, for example, some people have cross-reactivity with milk protein and their pancreatic islet cells, which makes insulin. So there's been some studies that show in some susceptible subgroups that when they ingest milk, those milk antibodies may increase the risk for developing type 1 diabetes because the proteins in milk, casein, are very similar to the proteins found in the islet beta cells. Now, cross-reactivity has to take place with something called loss of immune tolerance, and the combination of both of those in susceptible subgroups can cause specific symptoms and specific reactions. So this is something that is also another part of the immune response. So not only can foods cause Ig allergies or IgG food sensitivities, or you can have genetic response to T foods, but once antibodies are made, if people also have a severely dysregulated immune system, which is called loss of immune tolerance, some food protein can directly bind to tissue and cause significant symptoms. So here's an example of certain foods, for example, have been shown to cross-react with a thyroid gland. Gluten, for example, has been shown to cross-react with a thyroid gland. Food proteins that contain lectins, like pea protein, agglutinins in beans have been shown to cross-react with the thyroid gland. So in those scenarios, if they ingest those foods, antibodies made against those foods can also then bind to human tissue because the human proteins have amino acid sequences that are very similar to the food protein, and these antibodies bind to those tissues. But once antibodies bind to tissue, that tells the immune cells called T cells and natural killer cells, which are the soldiers of the immune system, to destroy that tissue. That's called cross-reactivity. So this is another mechanism that can happen with foods that are involved with immune responses.
All right, so you get the idea there. So the issue becomes so the tight junctions open up, these food proteins go into systemic circulation. The immune system says, this shouldn't be here. And because the amino acid sequence looks very similar to human tissue, the immune system starts attacking your tissues. Lupus, Hashimoto's, MS, ALS, all of these diseases start to propagate. And as I showed you with this, where is it? Where all of these autoimmune diseases propagate. So that's what can show up. So once your gut isn't healthy, this is what can show up. So just to wrap up this nice and tight, and I'll show you what to do next, is quite simply, when you got a sick gut, you're not digesting your proteins properly. So that's problem one. So whether it's a meat protein or a plant protein, this is the big amino acids. We need to break them down. So the gut tries its best. And it breaks it down to peptides. And this goes into the small intestine. And because your gut's not working too well, you're not digesting your food too well, they can't be broken down to single amino acids. So these food proteins go into the bloodstream. We call them antigens. Now, the immune cells have got, you start with monocytes. So these monocytes differentiate into macrophages and dendritic cells. So they engulf these proteins that shouldn't be there. Remember, amino acids should be there, not proteins from food. So that's a problem. The immune system's like, we have to fix this problem. So these macrophages and dendritic cells gobble them up, and then they present them to the T memory cells. So they push them onto the surface on this receptor there. The memory cells attack them, and the T cells have a memory. And remember that every time you eat this food, we're going to launch an exaggerated immune response. Now, the great news is this. These T cells largely forget once you heal the gut. So after about 6 months, maybe 12 months, you can retest the IgG food test there. So that's your immunoglobulin food test. And you'll see that you can eat a plethora of different foods now. So the great news is you can fix this, but you have to become the detective. So if you've got any questions, drop a comment below. And if you like these videos, help me out here, share and like this and comment below. It really helps me reach other people. I want to show people that they can fix this, but we need to be the detective. What you don't measure, you don't know. It is that simple. If you're not looking at your gut health, if you're not looking at your immune health, if you don't know the difference between standard labs, which is terrible, and functional labs, which is optimal, then we just can't get back to health. And I'll talk about that more towards the end. Now, we'll just quickly finish on, I'll show you what to do, but we'll finish on gluten because I think it's very important. Now, when the medical system tests you for wheat allergies or celiac disease, right, the wheat allergy, gliadin alpha, that's all they're testing. And then tissue transglutamase 2 in the gut, and they forget everything else. You've also got the lectin component, wheat germ gluten, and some tests do that. You've also got the opioid heroin-like molecule, glutamorphin, which is highly addictive. So that's why food companies put wheat in everything. Milk is also, it forms these morphine-like molecules, and so does soy. So you'll see dairy and soy and gluten and everything, especially condiments there, because it's highly addictive. And then, of course, it comes down here in the transglutamases. So you've got the celiac gut, then you got celiac skin and celiac brain there. Now, the food industry make this food compound called deaminated gliadin there. Now, as Data says in his book, Why My Brain Isn't Working, right here, so pick that one up. It's a beautiful read. Many people will never test positive on a conventional gliadin antibody test, but they will have a profound immune reactions to deaminated gliadin from the food industry, no less, because it's all for profit. It's all for profit. If you suffer from impaired brain function, testing for deaminated gluten is absolutely critical. So you can see what's going on there. So gluten ataxia, let's check it out. And now, to understand gluten ataxia, again, I've got the legend, Dr. Datis, just speaking about it.
They get severe brain inflammation when they eat it. They can even have their blood-brain barrier, gut barrier breakdown. They can set up the stage for neurological autoimmunity. They can decrease blood flow to their brain. As their brain gets inflamed, their messenger synaptic pathways become slower, and they just don't function well. And they walk in the healthcare system and they get diagnosed with chronic depressive disorder or chronic anxiety disorder or some other name. And they get told they don't have celiac disease if they're even tested that way, and then they continue to have problems with them. So lots of papers have been published where they see white matter lesions throughout the brain. This is, for example, another study which shows lack of blood flow with people that have gluten sensitivity, and this is one with celiac disease. And for the most part, inflammation in the gut causes inflammation in the brain. And it's not uncommon to see what are called hyperintensities, these white matter lesions with people that have gluten sensitivity. And numerous studies have now shown that people that have any kind of inflammation in the gut, like any kind of inflammatory bowel disorder, have a much, much, much higher rate of these white matter lesions in their brain, which is basically inflammation destroying parts of the sheath of the brain called myelin. So those are pretty important. So, gluten is a serious issue. If you have any kind of cognitive decline, you should know about these. And then there's been studies published where they identify these white matter lesions. You can see them here on MRI, and people go on a gluten-free diet, and sometimes they completely resolve.
All right. So really important to understand there, it's not just the tissue transglutamase 6, right? TG6. It's also gluten sensitivity. So when you've got poor gut health, inflammation in the gut causes inflammation in the brain and causes those white lesion matters. So any food sensitivity can start to drive that. But gluten, what we've found in testing over 250 people now, over 90% have some form of gluten sensitivity or celiac disease. Now, the great news is this study here, 1 year, you see these white lesions, like there's a shit ton, right? Look at that. And they healed. So you can recover. Now, you have to be completely gluten-free. As I've learned working with my team of experts, the functional doctors for been close to 5 years now, just one crouton is enough to cause an exaggerated immune response for 6 months. And I know you're saying, well, geez, that seems unlikely. Well, they've tested this. They've shown this over and over again. It is that important. It's just like, it's just like being pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not. You're either gluten-free or you're not. You have to take this extraordinarily seriously. So do the testing, do the immune testing, do the genetic testing to find out where you are. the GI map, all those testings. And if you want to know more information about that, drop a comment below, and I'm happy to do a deep dive on how to do all these testings. But I'm going to give you an overview here today. And then, of course, you've got skin issues. So it starts to show up as little pimples like this. So check out your skin. Have you got them anywhere? On your butt, on the back of your arms? Is it anywhere? On your groin, anywhere? You probably think it's just a sweat rash. Maybe not. Maybe you've got this starting to propagate. And non-celiac gluten sensitivity, hormones, skin, muscle and joint, other problems, gut symptoms, immune symptoms, head and nervous system. So as you can see there, the gut really is the key to health. So you have to become the detective. Now, let me show you what that looks like. So basically, what you want to do is look at your exposome. Exposome encompasses your internal exposome. So hormones, your microbiome, your gut health, right? That is comprehensive blood lab in functional ranges, not this bullshit standard range shit. And I'll show you an example of that in a moment. Then your external factors, like if you've got stress, like anxiety and depression, but these food sensitivities are driving that. They're driving that stress. You're fatigued. You feel like shit, and it's driving this social stress. And then you've also got things like electromagnetic radiation. There's a plethora of information on YouTube about that. So just do your due diligence. And then you've got vitamin and mineral status. Like if you're lacking retinol, vitamin A, vitamin D, all the B vitamins, the micro minerals, you've got issues. The pathways don't work. And then, of course, things like alcohol, pharmacological issues like caffeine, you might be sensitive to caffeine. And xenobiotics, your liver might be working too well. Then, of course, the genome, we've touched on the genome. So you could have single nucleotide polymorphisms. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this, some people have very few of these issues with their DNA. So they get to 60, 78 and they're kicking ass and they can still live a pretty poor lifestyle. But if you're someone like me, it starts to show up at 25 as anxiety, panic attacks, gut issues, gaining weight. That's what shows up. And you go to your doctor and he does a blood work. So, they don't look too bad and they send you on your way and you feel like shit. And you go back and say, look, I've got this anxiety I can't get rid of. Well, here's this big pharma drug that you can have. And what I've learned working with functional doctors is that a lot of these big pharma drugs, they lower testosterone. They even say that on the warning label, lowers libido. So you go through that. Basically, you can do your DNA, your GI map, and I'll talk about how to do that in a moment, and also IgG testing as well. So all of those things can be looked at. And of course, you got to dial in your training, your sleep, your sunlight, your stress. You got to be lifting weights. You got to be doing all those things. And that's when you can get back in the game. Now, an example of blood labs is homocysteine. When has your physician checked your homocysteine? If not, ask them why not? Because homocysteine, two issues. They'll say that 14 and below is okay. No, we need to get it between 5 and 8 as a maximum. So when it's over 10, you've got a twofold, I repeat, twofold increased risk of heart disease because it causes lesions in your arteries and plaque to build up. So atherosclerosis, heart attack, and stroke. So why aren't they checking this? Then you've got epilepsy, dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, MS, autoimmune disease for the brain, your hearing and eyesight tap out, your reproductive organs tap out, your endocrine issues. You see, you got diabetes and insulin resistance. Then your muscles and your bones tap out. Then renal damage, kidney damage there. So what you can think, what you can do is just understand it like this. You see these two mice here? This was worked out a long time ago. So these two mice, they've got exactly the same genes. So scientists made sure these two mice had the same gene. Now this one was not methylating, so they weren't methylating, and this one was methylating. So what methylation is all about is understanding where your homocysteine. So this is like a proxy. So you see homocysteine here at 12 is marked as high. So this is an advanced methylation panel. So let's just focus in on it in this methylation panel. So we want everything in the green in the butter zone here, right? You can see here that their Sam Desai, I know this sounds geeky, but I just want to show you a point here. This is no good. 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 And this is no good. So we know right now with this advanced methylation test that you are not methylating. So the consequences of that is even if you got two people side by side, one people is eating to their genetic blueprint, their immune blueprint, they're going to thrive, right? Doesn't matter what your genes are doing, you can still thrive. But if you're not doing what your DNA blueprint, your immune blueprint does, that's when cancer shows up, heart disease shows up, and you pack on the weight. So this has been shown in humans now. So think about that. So you got to have a look at all of these factors, your DNA, your gut health, your immune health. And once you go through that learning curve, you can start to piece together where you're out. And then you can easily fix this. All right. So, what we do is we do this with our clients and we give them their first snapshot. So we test the gut, we test the DNA, we test the gut health, and these are the foods that are going to rebuild you and thrive. And we take off the table, the breakfast, lunch, and dinner table, all the foods that are taking you out, causing anxiety, fatigue, poor testosterone, detox, brain function, all of those things, and the supplements that you need genetically. So some people, as I mentioned before, like my son, he's got remarkable abilities to not need very many vitamins and minerals. I need up to 5 times the RDI. So my wife is the same and my son is the same. They don't need a lot of vitamins and minerals. Now, my poor daughters, I've got 3 daughters and they're all like me. They need more vitamins and minerals. So we're all uniquely different. And that's the difference between that one there, and humans are the same, and that one there. So your genetics loads the gun, and your lifestyle and food choices are profound. So I hope you found that helpful. If you've got any questions, drop a comment below. So, just to sum it all up, just to go over everything there. You've got immune issues, and we can test for this, and you've got DNA issues, which we can test for. Gut health is the foundation. And all of this, emotional stress, physical stress, genetic stress, immune stress, chemical stress, mold, heavy metals, can all drive a leaky gut. Then this starts to show up in your life. So it doesn't matter what kind of genes you got, you can still fix this. It does take time, anywhere from 3 to 12 months. Just depends on how old you are and what kind of detective work shows up, how long it's going to take for you. But the important thing to understand is you can fix this. There is hope. If you go through all of that testing, you can do this. So if you've got any questions, drop a comment below because you've got a lot of power to live a very long and healthy life. Increase your lifespan so you show up strong. You increase your earning potential, your life's potential, and you feel good because life is a gift. Why show up with a loaded gun and be packing on the way, have anxiety, depression, and think it's you? You feel like a lazy loser. Don't live life like that, my friend. We can do better. And through all this testing, we can get to a place where we thrive. So there it is. You got any questions? Drop them in the comments below.